To me, Austinites have always been ones to speak our minds, but lately doing that has felt risky, which makes me wonder, has the definition of free speech changed? Today on CityCast Austin, I'm talking to a First Amendment lawyer about what we really can or cannot say. It's Tuesday, October 14th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with J.T. Morris, Senior Supervising Attorney for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, which I love, and the lead attorney in federal lawsuit challenging the Texas Campus Protection Act. What is up, J.T.? How are you?
I'm good, Nikki. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. And we are also joined by our executive producer, Eva Ruth Moravec. What's up, Eva Ruth?
Can't keep me out of a free speech conversation.
So, okay, Austin is home to lots of people who interact with the public, from performers to lawmakers and educators and more. Right here, right now in Austin, I think the big question is, should people be limiting what they say in the public sphere, whether it be social media or even on stage as a performer? Should we be mindful about what we say?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I'm a First Amendment attorney, right? And so, I always tell everybody who comes to me, I don't want to limit you in what you're going to say. You should exercise your First Amendment rights, right? We have rights. If we don't exercise them, they're just going to die, right? So it troubles me that we're operating in an environment now where people in Austin and all over Texas have to think about that. And it's a legitimate concern, right? When you have elected officials and lawmakers going on social media and sending out press releases demanding that public school teachers be fired or students be kicked off campus, or protesters be arrested for exercising their First Amendment rights, you have to wonder, am I next? But I think the best way to push back against that is exercise the right and the freedoms that the Constitution gives you. Government officials are going to keep acting out if we go silent. And so I would urge everybody, use your political voice. The First Amendment protects it. The Constitution protects it. And, there's folks like me and my colleagues at FIRE and other, good attorneys and advocates in Texas and all over the country who are going to be there if the government comes and gives you a hard time for doing what the Constitution says you have every right to do.
That's really good to hear, because you do not know this about me, but I am a shit talker, and I like to be able to express myself, and I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
But it does feel like a weird time. It really does. Speaking of politicians, recently Attorney General Ken Paxton announced that he's launched, and I'm putting this in quotation marks, an undercover investigations into various groups affiliated with left-wing political violence known to be operating in Texas. First of all, that could be anybody. Who is at risk of being caught up in this? Like, it feels as if we're not allowed to criticize the government anymore. So, who is stuff like this affecting?
It's hard to say. The problem with these press releases is they're so vague and so open-ended that they leave themselves open to officials abusing them. You saw this, I think, a few weeks ago with President Trump targeting Antifa and other ideologies the administration doesn't like. And same in Attorney General Paxton's letter or press release where he's talking about ideologies like Antifa and transgenderism. When I see, as a First Amendment attorney, a government official targeting ideology, that's a big red flag, because it tells me they're going after somebody's viewpoint, right? Whether that's what they think or how they express themselves. And so you get real concern when you see these sorts of orders and these sorts of investigations, because for a government official who's really bent on silencing or punishing viewpoints that the government in who's in power doesn't like at that moment, they give them a tool to go after those viewpoints they don't like. And so I don't think it's going to be your everyday Austinite who's going on Twitter or Facebook and in your words, shit talking Nikki about the government, which obviously, the First Amendment so strongly protects your right to do so. But it is just more of, I think, that really concerning trend we're seeing with officials, putting out these edicts and proclamations about ideologies that they're labeling as terroristic when, expressing an ideology is something that's fully protected under the Constitution.
I think where this fear kind of started a lot was with Jimmy Kimmel and seeing a comedian get, for lack of a better phrase, canceled because of what he was saying. And I know in Austin, we have some very outspoken drag queens who get threats all the time. This is nothing new, and have been targeted by our government, our state government before too. But we also have comedians here. Like it made me think of Joe Rogan's comedy Mothership venue. And like, I've been there before and it is pretty crass, and making a death joke. Like, I know that sounds crazy in this atmosphere, but like, comedians do stuff like that all the time, so are they at risk of Ken Paxton in the audience listening, and going after people like that? Or is that not the right lane for the target to be on? You know what I mean? It just, I don't know. Or is this just unknown?
Yeah, I think it's unknown, right? But I think as we're seeing sort of this expansion of targets. And you could even go back to the Biden administration, right? Who kind of, were pressuring social media companies to remove certain political views during the pandemic, in other events that they did, they were labeling as misinformation, but it was really people's opinions about things. And now the political winds have shifted, and now you're seeing it from the Trump administration and state officials too, where they're pressuring companies. You saw it with ABC and Jimmy Kimmel even before that, pressuring universities like Harvard and Columbia, adopt our certain way of thinking or else we're going to strip your federal funding. You saw some of the executive orders going after big law firms, right? Threatening them, to sue them or come after them if they don't sort of bow to the administration's wishes. And so, I think when you right now, what you're seeing is our institutions in large part caving to political pressure to censor and silence speakers that are critical of those in power right now. It's a really dangerous and scary thing, I think, to think about when you think of institutions like the media and higher education and comedians and the like. They've traditionally been sort of a bulwark against that political pressure, right? They've never been a state to stand up and sort of say, give officials a middle finger and say, here's my First Amendment rights, take them and shove them where the sun doesn't shine. Instead, what you're seeing now is them sort of caving into that pressure. So, while I don't think that, again, the everyday comedian is going to be a target right now, what concerns me is you get that trickle down effect as the bigger institutions start normalizing this, acquiescence to what the government says they have to do if they want to stay in the government's good graces, and they end up censoring employees or comedians or talk show hosts or their journalists. That's going to trickle down, and as it becomes more and more normalized from our institutions, then the government gets more power to go after pretty much anybody they don't like. And so I think, my shtick to everybody out there, again, stand up for your First Amendment rights, right? Don't let the bully strip you of those. Like, the Constitution guarantees it. Exercise your freedoms.
It feels good to hear you say that, because I think that sometimes we get into this mindset of like, oh my God, this is brand new. This has never happened. But to your point, it has happened. It seems so incredibly extreme. It just seems like nobody can say anything.
And I think the only thing I can compare it to, and obviously I don't think any of us were around back then, is McCarthyism, right? Back in the 50s. But you listen to people who were around in that era, and it's the same sort of tone. I think it's probably a little bit more, even more aggressive now than it was back then. But I think it's that same culture of fear. If I say something, if I say the wrong thing, is some official going to misconstrue that and haul me before a hearing or put me in jail?
Yeah. Hey y'all, it's Nikki. And if you know anything about me, you know how much I love old school hip hop. So when I found out about the new exhibit that just opened at the LBJ Presidential Library that's curated by the Grammy Museum, you know I had to tell y'all all about it. It's called Hip Hop America, the Mixtape Exhibit. And it's full of incredible memorabilia celebrating hip hop's rise from street culture to the global stage, shaping music, fashion, business, and activism. So check out some of the stuff you can see. The black suede fedora hat and Adidas superstars belonging to Daryl DMC McDaniels of Run DMC, the Kangol hat and Troop velour jacket worn by LL Cool J, and my personal favorite, Chuck D's handwritten lyrics to Fight the Power. So you have to go check it out now at lbjlibrary.info/hiphop. Step into the conversation shaping Texas's future at the Texas Tribune Festival. The Texas Tribune is bringing together inspiring thinkers, leaders, and innovators to discuss the issues that matter to you. Dive into unforgettable conversations spanning education, the economy, healthcare, energy, technology, public safety, culture, the arts, and more. TribFest gives you an up-close look at how big ideas take shape and how they affect your life. You'll connect with fellow Texans, engage directly with experts and leaders, and leave inspired to turn your boldest ideas into reality. And y'all, this isn't just another political event. It's a catalyst for shaping the future of Texas today. So mark your calendar, November 13th through 15th in downtown Austin. Get info and tickets at tribfest.org. So a new state law called the Campus Protection Act is now in effect, and it restricts protests on public university campuses in a few different ways. And this one is kind of scrambling my brain a little bit. I've said this a lot on the podcast. I went to UT, and when I went to UT, somebody was always protesting something. Like there was always someone out in front of the clock tower with a sign. There was just like freely yelling with a megaphone.
It would not be a public university if that weren't the case,
Exactly.
Amen.
There was always a petition to sign. There was always like a grievance for us to like buck against. And so this is really scary that now it's like even on public universities where this is where you're supposed to be learning who you are and how to, what your rights are and what you can do in the world and what you feel and how you can show up. How did we get here? And like, what does this new law do? What does it mean?
Yeah, so a little bit of the backstory. Back in 2019, the Texas legislature passed a bill called the Campus Free Speech Act. And what it did is it largely enshrined in state statutory law, the strong First Amendment protections that the Supreme Court has established for student speech on campus. And, told campus administrators you have to pass policies that ensure that you don't discriminate against students because of their viewpoint. You provide them the same benefits no matter what ideologies they have. It opened the campus up as traditional public forums, so even members of the public could come on. You think about a place like UT Austin. I mean, I'm up there probably every few months, and it feels like part of the city, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
no different from a public park or a sidewalk, and so that was a good thing.
That was Republicans protecting that. I mean, Republicans have been in power in Texas for many years, but who was responsible for passing that bill?
It was the chief sponsors of that bill were Republicans. It received great bipartisan support, as it should have, right? We want to your point, Nikki, college is a place where, free speech rights should be at their zenith. I mean, they're little marketplaces of ideas. And not only that, but they're the place where, young adults go to learn how to engage in civic life. We don't want to curtail that and handcuff their ability to do that at our public universities. And of course, the First Amendment protects them there because they're state run, and the First Amendment tells, state officials, you can't tell people what to think or how to express themselves. But fast forward right from 2019, when the legislature passed this great bill, 6 years. And in this past session, I think in the wake of the campus protests, we saw it at UT Austin and UT Dallas and other places across the state in spring 2024, the legislature passed this bill. But it doesn't target things like violence or vandalism just by itself. What it does is it targets nothing but protected speech. It commands public universities to prohibit nearly all protected speech between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. So if you're a college student, you can't engage in a quiet political discussion on campus. If you can't have a sunrise prayer service.
Nothing.
You can't peacefully hold a sign at 6 a.m. in the morning protesting
or a vigil,
whatever you want to protest.
Would a vigil count?
Vigil.
Wow.
Yeah. So it does other things too. It says during the last 2 weeks of any academic term or semester, state universities have to prohibit invited speakers. They have to prohibit using amplified sound. You can't even play drums. So, I mean, imagine, And so one of my favorite examples is you think about spring semester at UT Austin, the end of that is almost always going to overlap with, sort of the meat of the Texas legislature.
Yeah.
So you couldn't, a political student group couldn't invite a legislator to campus to talk about, a hotly contested pending bill without violating what this law says. And it's your point, Eva, this bill passed with bipartisan support. So
wow.
it wasn't, this wasn't a Republican versus Democrat thing. This was like,
the fuck?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
So my group FIRE, we filed a lawsuit challenging the worst parts of this act, mainly those two things I just explained, this sort of ban on overnight speech and this ban on a variety of speech the last 2 weeks of campus. And, we have a variety of plaintiffs, I think, that really encapsulate how extensive and shocking this law's reach is. And we have a Christian student group who says, hey, we have ministers we need to invite to campus. We have discussions of faith after 10 p.m. We have a student newspaper at UT Dallas. If you know anything about student journalists, they're always working after 10 p.m. I mean, that's when they get the meat of their work done. Mm-hmm. And we have, some student musicians who saying, we now don't know whether we can put on our shows or rehearse without, violating the policies that our schools have passed because of this bill. So, we'll wait to see what the judge does with it. We're optimistic, but, it's one of those bills you just don't understand why it passed through in the first place, but it did.
Why does it even exist? It's college.
And look, I mean, and lawmakers and college administrators, yes, you have an interest in maintaining, campus safety. You want to make sure that students that are sleeping and are studying and taking exams aren't, disrupted in their ability to do that. You want to preserve the academic mission of the university. But banning all speech 10 hours a day, saying you can't have invited speakers or play instruments the last 2 weeks of any term, that's not the way to meet those goals at all.
Also, if you're that concerned about safety and you're that concerned about, making sure other students can sleep at night, maybe you should start with all of the other extraneous noise, the parties, the frat parties, the keggers, all that other shit.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, what if you held a protest that was just a frat party?
What are you talking about? What are they talking about? It's ridiculous.
Hi, I'm Michael Ziviak, Chief Revenue Officer of CityCast. Why do most of us want to learn a new language? It's because we want to speak it out in the real world with real people. Babbel gets you there fast. My daughter's a senior in high school, and after she graduates, we're taking a father-daughter trip to Spain. I know, she's spoiled, but that's on me. I'll be honest, my Spanish right now is pretty much tops out at Donde está la biblioteca? But when we get there, I want to actually talk to people, order food, and really connect with the locals, not just stumble through the basics. That's why I'm starting with Babbel. Learning a language with Babbel is all about small steps, big wins, and progress you can actually track and feel. And with how busy things get here at CityCast, I love that Babbel's bite-sized, 10-minute lessons fit perfectly into my day, whether it's between meetings or while I'm having coffee in the morning. I'm really excited to start picking up real-world Spanish before our trip so we can experience Spain in a more meaningful way. Right now, Babbel has a special deal for our listeners. Get up to 55% off your subscription at babbel.com/citycast. That's BABBEL.com/citycast for up to 55% off. Rules and restrictions may apply. Gracias and adios.
I just got home from a vacation, and though I had a great time, all I could think about was getting back to my bed. Because in my bed, there's no tossing and turning. I have all the pillows I need, and I have my favorite set of Cozy Earth sheets, which keep me comfortable all throughout the night. Now, y'all have heard me talk about these before, but you have got to try them. It's risk-free because they have a 100-night sleep trial. So honestly, if you don't like them, you can send them back. But if you do like them, and I think you might, you will get a 10-year warranty, so you can enjoy them for a long, long time. So head on over to CozyEarth.com and of course use my code CozyAustin for 40% off. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure you let them know that you heard it from me. Because your bed should be more than a place to sleep. It should be your happy place. Cozy Earth makes that possible. Okay, now one thing it also prohibits is people who aren't affiliated with the university from being present at protests. And you mentioned this earlier, and it's so true. UT feels like a part of the city. It just feels like another, I was driving by the other day and I was like, oh, I should go take a walk around campus, because that is how much a part of the city it feels. It does not feel like it is a separate place, especially since it is it's like smack dab in the middle of the city.
Right.
So like, prohibiting people who aren't affiliated with the university from being present at protests. Like, we do have other places like the Capitol where people who aren't students or faculty can protest. Yes, sure. But if you're trying to protest something that has to do with the rights of students and has to do with the way the university is behaving, it makes sense to me that if you're an Austinite, you will protest in that place.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Am I wrong? Like what? Like this just seems like a bad thing to me.
I don't think you're wrong. And again, it's kind of just the blanket approach this law takes to everything, right? There's no sort of exceptions. There's no presumption, to protect peaceful protests. It's just, unless you're the student, faculty, or staff, you have no right to express yourself at a public university. And again, especially for an urban university like UT Austin, where, if you're traversing, from Guadalupe to I-35 between, Martin Luther King and 20-something Street, I mean, you're probably going to intersect with the university at some point, right? And so, yeah, I think that's problematic. And it's just not protesters, right? I mean, you have, for example, voter registrars who want to go on campus and help students get registered to vote. We've heard stories about certain universities saying, too bad, you can't come here anymore. So, you have, and now sort of you have this sort of anti-democratic function that's imperiling students' ability to understand their voting rights and get signed up and go exercise the rights at the polling place.
I'm curious to see what happens this week when there will be a protest testing this. There's a UT protest planned against the idea of, UT going along with the funding option that Donald Trump proposed. That, like, UT is on a list of 9 universities that if they agree to certain things, they can get special access to funding from the president. And I think the president of the university has said, yeah, cool, thank you so much. Great opportunity. And maybe students have a different idea. So I guess we'll get a test case soon, maybe.
This is kind of also happening, like, at the same time, the Capitol last month, the leaders established committees in the House and the Senate to focus on, again, I quote, civil discourse and freedom of speech in higher education. And it just feels like, once again, they've just caught onto one thing like a dog with a bone, and they can't let it go. What are these subcommittees for? And why does it feels very unusual to me that lawmakers are this involved in free speech on higher education campuses. Like this actually does feel just a little wackadoo to me.
Well, and I don't have a lot of information. I know they were put together. They said they're going to, talk about and investigate free speech on the state's college campuses. But I don't know what the timing is going to be. I'm not sure what they plan to discuss. One would hope they sort of look back and say, oops, we messed up in some ways. Let's get back to constitutional principles, and let's make sure that, as state officials, and let's make sure our public university boards and presidents and administrators are upholding the First Amendment at college campuses. I'm hopeful they'll do that.
Yeah.
But I just don't know what their plan is, and I'd have to speculate otherwise, and
as opposed to coming up with
not
lists,
for me to do so,
like McCarthy era kind of lists that there of people that they should go after.
Certainly hope that's not the case.
I've been having a lot of conversations lately about free speech, especially, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk, right? And I've been having these conversations about whether or not, the vile things that he was saying is protected or is okay as far as free speech is concerned. And if that was okay, why isn't people's response to his death protected, right? So I've been having these really hard conversations with friends and people around. And I think that, I am one of those people that Charlie Kirk was well within his right to say whatever vile, disgusting shit he wanted to say. That is a part of being in this.
American.
To me, that's a part of being American. Mm-hmm. You say some things that I find terrible and vile and awful, and in response, I can say whatever I want to say. It feels like, to me, that is how this country works. That's it. Now, do I think we should have a statue of him at our Capitol? Absolutely not. But I do believe that he was well within his right to say the things that he said, however terrible I think they are. My point is, all of this has started this kind of push and pull about what is free speech, and should it be determined by whether or not it upsets people? And so I'm just curious, especially since you're actively going through litigation about free speech, how do you approach how do you approach the definition of free speech? Because I feel like those waters are being muddied now at this point, where it's okay for certain people to say things, but other people cannot say things. If you don't like it, you can't say it. What is your definition of free speech?
It's a good question. So let me take sort of there's kind of a two-headed approach to this. So one is sort of the legal protections, right? That's the First Amendment. The First Amendment says the government can't interfere absent a really compelling interest with what we think, what we say, how we express ourselves. So even if you say vile things, even if you say horrible things about the governor or your local mayor, your local city councilman, the First Amendment protects you, right? I mean, political discourse is, it's so fundamental to our American way of life, especially heated, inflammatory, and sometimes, political discourse that offends half the country. It's your right to say, and the First Amendment protects that. And then there's sort of, I think, the normative and social, cultural side of free speech, where I think we're really struggling as a country with today. And I think for exactly the reasons you put out there, it's this sort of cognitive dissonance where, well, if the people who I support or the views I support are being shut down, that's bad, right? free speech means I get to say the things I like to say and express the views I believe in. When it's on the the shoes on the other foot, to take your example from the Charlie Kirk murder and sort of the fallout from that, when people are sort of saying, well, yeah, I'm glad he died, or things along that line, that's free speech too. You might not like it, you might find it vile, but as a culture that traditionally we are open to a robust and rough and tumble discourse, because we are searching for the truth. We're trying to find what ideas are right. We're trying to to kind of come together and to advance society in that way. You have to tolerate the person's right to express that. You don't have to tolerate the view, because it's your right to tell them they're an idiot if you disagree with them, right? Exactly,
yeah.
But you can't shut them down. And you can't enlist the government to shut them down. And so, free speech, I think it, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, it's Justice Holmes from the early 20th century says essentially, free speech is really tolerating the thoughts and the speech that we hate. And it really is. And, for me personally, I think there's the legal, there's the cultural side to it. There's a human dignity side to it too. And I take this probably from, being married for over a decade. Like, people want to be heard. When you stifle people's ability to express themselves, it builds resentment. And that resentment fosters, really bad things, right? It sends speech to the back rooms of bars and dark alleys. And to me, I'd rather have people express themselves, one, so that resentment doesn't build, but two, so we know what's on people's minds. Like, I'd rather know what people are thinking, as maybe I agree with it, or I might find it reprehensible, but I know it's out there.
Or can you believe people think this way? Yeah.
Yeah, but at least you know. At least you know.
If it's reprehensible, then guess what? We can engage in counter speech and, explain to the public, that's why this is reprehensible. Reject those ideas and follow the right thing, right? But silencing people is never the answer, right? Censorship is never the answer to solving anything. And I think history shows us that, right? I mean, you go through the battles of between the Roman Catholic Church and the upstart Protestant Church, and what happened in Nazi Germany when sort of the Weimar Republic tried to shut them down, and then they turn around, they get power, and they use those laws to censor everybody who doesn't agree with them, and obviously we all know do much worse than that.
I love that you say, like, basically use it or lose it, though. Like, that's kind of the message going forward. I think at least right now, like, don't give up. Don't silence yourself. Just be out of fear of where this is going.
I think that the easier and the more normal we make it for government officials to silence Americans, the easier it's going to get for us to lose those rights.
To be silenced, yeah.
Yep.
JT, thank you so much for coming on and having a conversation with us. This has been great. It's been a long time since I've gotten this fired up internally by conversation. So I really appreciate you taking the time being here today. I really do.
No, it's absolutely been a pleasure and happy to be on. Thank you guys so much.
That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Fire's work in our show notes. And if you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. But, if you really, really love us and you love what we do and you love listening to us, support us by becoming a neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.